one of the most beloved of all the Hasidic masters, and that is Rabbi Levi Isaac of Berdichev, called the Berdichever. He was a disciple of the Maggid of Mezrich, and he was one of the coterie of third-generation Hasidic rabbis who went out into the world and set up their own Hasidic community. In this case, Levi Isaac of Berdichev was born in 1740 in Galicia, which is southern Poland and southern Poland and western Ukraine. He started a career as a very promising young Talmud scholar. He was called an Eloi, which means an exceptional prodigy in Talmud. And he was certainly going in the direction of a traditional Talmudist rabbinic career. But he was captivated by Hasidism. He began to hear about these wonderful Hasidic rabbis, and he found himself drawn to a couple of different Hasidic teachers until he finally became one of the leading disciples of the Maggid of Mezrich. In 1775, he was appointed the communal rabbi of Pinsk, which is in Lithuania. Now, one of the great Jewish jokes is, you go from Minsk to Pinsk, right? Yes, there really is actually a Pinsk, just as there is a Minsk. So Pinsk is in Lithuania, in a region that had not yet been fully, or never was, brought over to the Hasidic cause. Lithuania, as I'd said many weeks ago, was the center of the Mitnagdic opposition to the Hasidic innovations. So he went right into the heart of the oppositional territory, the Talmudist-oriented centers of Lithuania. And he actually found himself, although he was a lovely person, he found himself in great difficulty and under tremendous pressure from the Mitnagdim, the opponents of Hasidism, in Pinsk. They did not like his overly ecstatic prayer as opposed to their more sober recitation of prayer within the specified time limits. They did not like his fervor in performing the mitzvot as opposed to the quiet performance of the mitzvot in as quick a time as possible so one could get on to what's really important, namely Talmud study. They didn't like his fervor in spending time on mitzvot. And they also did not like his association with the simple, unlearned Jews of the community and with those who were deemed sinners. They would have preferred that the rabbi only associate with the rabbinic and Talmudic elite, the knowledgeable class, the learned class. But one of the things that characterized his career throughout was that he was more interested in associating with the simple, humble Jews, and particularly with sinners, people who had dubious reputations within the community, than with the rabbinic elite. But in 1785, despite his best efforts, 10 years later, he was literally evicted overnight from Pinsk. The community, the oppositional community simply evicted him, and he became the rabbi of Berdichev. Now, it's not all that surprising, because generally most communal rabbis were, to a large extent, itinerant. No rabbi had a contract in this period, in this region, of longer than 3 years. They were renewable contracts, but very often they found themselves moving from town to town. But he was evicted even within his contract period. He came to Berdichev in 1785. Berdichev is about 50 miles west of Kiev, deep in the heart of Ukraine, and certainly more in the heart of the Hasidic population. I've been to Berdichev, I think about 25 years ago. Today it is or then it was a very rough Soviet industrial town, but it had a large Jewish cemetery where all the gravestones were scattered over acres and acres. But right in the center was this construction, a mausoleum, where Levi Isaac of Berdichev was buried, and which clearly was the only part of the cemetery that someone, it was clearly someone not from that town, continued to maintain, even through the 90s. And I'm sure today it's even better. So he became a beloved rabbi in Berdichev, and he would teach weekly, once a week, late Saturday afternoon, as the Sabbath departed, at the third meal of the Sabbath, the Seudah Shlishit, and then he would teach his teachings. So tonight we're going to look at his teachings, and just to have a little extra attraction, a little multimedia extravaganza towards the end. He was renowned for his concern for ordinary Jewish people. And I'm going to turn here to the handout that you all have and look at a number of different passages about him and by him. The first one is a report by one of his contemporaries, Ariel of Zhytomyr, which is very close by. Ariel of Zhytomyr is describing Levi Isaac. He said, there are times when the tzaddik, now the tzaddik is the new term that the third generation of Hasidim are using to describe the Hasidic rabbi. It wasn't enough that he was the Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name, or the Maggid of Mezrich. A new professional title was introduced, that of the tzaddik, the righteous person, as the Hasidic Rebbes were all called from the third generation on. So he says there are times when the tzaddik must be more friendly with evildoers than with those who do good. For should the evildoer be permitted to go his own way, he might end his life in the same state of wickedness, heaven forbid, and never repent. On the other hand, some who walk on the upright path take such pride in their goodness that at times it may be advisable to stay away from them. This was the way of the holy rabbi of Berdichev, to befriend the stranger even more than his own students. He would say that his drawing away from his students was in reality a way of drawing near, and there is in this much wisdom. So the question is, how would drawing nearer to strangers than his own students in reality being a way of drawing near? I think perhaps it's the role model of someone who gets down into the most needy part of the community, the ones who are least learned and the ones who may be least observant or who don't observe consistently. His disciples are in good shape. They need to learn sympathy for the other. And he's all about empathy and sympathy for those who need help and guidance and even just a good example. So he is going to be a less philosophical, less theoretical tzaddik than was the Baal Shem Tov or the Maggid of Mezrich. He's more, we might call him the relational tzaddik, the one for whom relationships with his followers, the Hasidim, and with others, regardless of whether they subscribe to his Hasidic teachings, he's interested in the ordinary Jew. The third generation, this generation of Hasidism, was marked by a rapid dissemination of the movement and its teachings by a good dozen of the disciples of the Maggid of Mezrich.